Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamasho Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste and very good morning to you all. And greetings from AuroBharati Sri Aurobindo Society, Pondicherry. It is indeed a matter of great pleasure for me to inform you that with the blessings of the Divine Mother, we have started several initiatives in the special year of 75th years of India's independence and 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. This is really a very special occasion for all the people around the world. You may be aware that Sri Aurobindo Society is an international cultural organization and has been recognized by the Government of India as a charitable organization and an institution of national importance throughout India. Sri Aurobindo Society organizes programs and initiatives that seek to bring dynamic spirituality into material life and all its activities. With its head office at Pondicherry, we have 300 branches and centers, and we're trying to invite participation from all those who want to work together for a better tomorrow with no distinction of any nationality, religion, caste, or gender. We have taken off several innovative projects at several levels. One of those is the project on the children. We have chosen the title Bal Samskriti towards creativity and integral development. We are inspired by the vision of our Divine Mother, where she says, the childhood is the symbol of the future and the hope, all victories to come. The objective of this Bal Samskriti project is to explore the creativity of children by providing quality education, awareness towards culture, facilitating vocational training, promoting moral education, and developmental activities for integral development. To begin with this, we have scheduled and we have invited Madam Rashmi Narzary ji, our today's guest of today's program, and she has accepted our invitation and spared her. It is a very busy schedule. In spite of time, she has agreed to deliver a lecture on the topic Socio-Cultural Context of Child Development and Integral Perfection. Madam Rashmi Narzary is an author, independent editor, creative writing mentor. She is presently the Joint Secretary of Northeast Writers Forum. She is an independent editor and has worked on projects with the UNICEF in India, the Assam government. Despite having a background in economics and human resource management, her creative pursuits within the literary realm have always been her passion. Hailing from the vibrant northeast of India, nature and natural human behavior find reflections in her writings. Her first book for children, Is Share of Sky, was listed for the Crossword Book Awards 2013. Among her translations, the Sahitya Academy Award-winning Shrinkhole by the eminent filmmaker, the late Dr. Bhavendranath Saikia, remains her most cherished work. She is the recipient of Prague Prerna Awards 2020 for her contribution towards literature from Honorable Government of Assam, His Excellency Professor Jagdish Mukhi and Padma Vibhushan awardee Sarmila Tagore. Some of her published works, including Singing a Spring Song, one among two stories from India, exclusively sought from YOMU, Inter-Country Asian Literary Project, Japan Foundation, an unfinished search, Bloodstone, Legend of the Last Engraving and Mosaic, The Colors of Life. Her works is being taught in universities and is researched for doctoral thesis as well. Some of her works have been translated into all the Indian and foreign languages. Appreciating and acknowledging her brilliant literary pursuits, she has been featured in TV serial Purvotar Ke Sitare, Humans of Northeast India, and extensively in the print and electronic media. Today, Madam Rashmi Narzary ji will speak on the topic, one of the interesting topics, that is socio-cultural context of child development and integral perfection. On behalf of Sri Aurobindo Society, I welcome you, ma'am. And also, I welcome to all the learned writers community, those who have joined for today's program. So now the floor is yours. Rashmi Narzary ji, please grace the occasion with your insights. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Sri Aurobindo Society, for giving me this privilege. And it is indeed an honor to be part of this inaugural talk of a sequence of talks. And I'm really so thankful to see all of you over here. And despite disease and despite COVID and whatever, we are still being able to interact and reach out for the benefit of children and society as a whole. Thank you so much. And regarding the topic, socio-cultural context of child development and integral perfection, I will look at the topic from solely the point of the perspective of an author, of a storyteller. It will not be from any academic perspective, but it will be from the perspective of a storyteller. And why do I want to discuss this theme with you from the perspective of a storyteller is because story and storytelling is the first and foremost medium to which children respond and understand. Because stories is a sequence of narration, whatever that narration be. It is a sequence of narration. And a narration of a sequence of events, actually. And when does a child start to respond to stories? This is right when the child is in the mother's womb. We all know the story of Prahlad. We all know the story of Ashtavakra. But for those who are not initiated into Hindu mythology and Hindu epics, let me just tell you quickly why I pick these instances, these examples. Sage Aruni had an ashram where he would teach Vedic lessons to his disciples. And his daughter, Kahuda, was also a student among his other students. And Sujata. And Kahuda was also a disciple among his other disciples. So when Sujata and Kahuda got married and Sujata got pregnant with her child, and one day when they were listening to the chants recited by Kahuda, the baby in the mother's fetus, it seems, legend says so, had spoken out that Kahuda had wrongly recited had made 8 mistakes in a recitation. So Kahuda got furious and he got humiliated. So he had cursed the fetus in the womb. He had cursed the unborn child that you will be born with 8 deformities. And hence Ashtavakra was born with 8 bends. Ashtavakra is actually the meaning. The meaning of Ashtavakra is 8 bends. Now, this is just an example to say that the child responds right from when it is in the mother's womb. And the same with Prahlad. Prahlad's mother Kahuda and father Hiranyakashipu. So when Prahlad was in his mother's womb, Kahuda would listen to Narada reciting Vishnu's tales. So Hiranyakashipu was the ruthless, I would not say a very dominating or cruel king, but I would say he was a very ruthless ruler. And later on, when his ruthlessness crossed all limits, it was Prahlad who had come to the rescue of creation. He had become the source of destruction of his father's ruthlessness. And why was it? Because he was listening from his mother's womb to tales of Lord Vishnu as was recited by sage Narada. So this is why I would like to say that stories have the most impact, the most brilliant and strong impact in a child, right from the time it is in the womb. And that is stage one. And later on, when the child is born, we see that when the mother coos near the child's ear, the child smiles a bit, and then he would like to touch the mother's face. So that is the touch, the sense of hearing. And as and when the child grows, the child starts to recognize and he starts to follow the voice of his mother or those he loves and turn around and look at those faces. That is the perception, the sense of hearing, and the sense of sight, of recognition. These all are forms of storytelling. The child understands and responds. Basically, storytelling is all about understanding and responding and communicating. So these are the first two stages. And later on, as the child grows, we will notice that the child has taken up to drawing and sketching of birds, of trees, of hills. These are the child's modes of expression. These are his form of storytelling. So, storytelling is something which develops the child in a very all-round way. It develops the child's senses, and we will also come to the sixth sense. Normally, we have all the five senses, that is according to anatomy. But there is also something called the sixth sense, the intuition, the subconscious. We will come to it. We have to come to it because it is the most significant part of the wholesome development of a child's psychology. And before we proceed, can I please share my screen and show you a short video so that we understand the nitty-gritties of the five senses and how they play a very important role in the development of a child's psychology. Can I please?
Yeah, please.
Now the picture is showing
experiences
and
of
do you
the
get the
past
audio?
when she saw a squirrel,
Yeah, now the
a
video is playing.
real
Thank you.
one, when
The
she
audio
had
is
gone
also
out
there?
for a
Audio is
walk with
also
her
clear.
grandma
Okay, thank you
to
so
the
much for bringing
park
it to my notice.
on an autumn afternoon. Plenty of squirrels. One even let her hold him. It felt so soft and fluffy. The next day they brought peanuts to feed them with the help of the little boy who stayed near the park. And talking of peanuts made Dani fondly remember that her friend's mommy had baked peanut cookies. They smelled so good.
Here we see how the senses, each of the senses, play an important role in Dani's bonding. Dani is the child, and Dani is bonding with the grandfather, with the grandmother, with animals in the park, and it also strengthens her feelings of sharing with animals, with friends, and there is an overall impact in the growth of the child. She understands things. She feels touch. And this is all about storytelling. It need not be a very complicated process, a very complicated structure where we have characters and backdrop, and it has to follow certain regulations. No, storytelling is not about that. Storytelling, whether it be history, whether it be geography, whether in fact it also be math, it is the narration of a sequence of events. And these sequence of events have to be very creative so as to hold the child's interest. For instance, you all might be wondering, why is Rashmi saying math is a sequence of events in the form of narration? There was two, I'm giving you an example. There was two. And then there was another 2. So together they formed 4. Isn't this a sequence of events? So if we make things this simple, so I think they will hold on longer in a child. And as long as the child is active to responding and receiving storytelling, her inertia of learning is also built and developed. And we also say that children learn faster than grown-ups. I wonder why. Because at one point of time, I think grown-ups stop listening to stories, they stop telling stories. So the inertia of learning gets stopped there, which is why we don't learn as fast as kids, I believe. But if we continue with storytelling and learning and observing nature and everything around, I think this process continues. So my sole purpose of showing you this video was that the senses, how they act upon a child's development and how there is a kind of bonding in the children and how they develop socially. Now, I would also like to show you other screens here. And then the next one, we see smell here, and we see touch in the squirrel. Here in the second image, we see there's a difference the child learns from storytelling and from actual interaction in the outside world, because softness can be of so many different types. There is the soft squirrel, butter is soft, the pillow is soft, velvet is soft. But what kind of different softness are these? No theory book will be able to tell us that, how soft it is. And the smell of maybe fruits, the smell of flowers, how you distinguish between them is not possible in just theory classes. So which is why I think it is very important for children to go out in the open, learn things and listen, maybe in the form of storytelling, because that is the first and foremost medium of teaching and learning in a child, so that the child understands and learns, and the wholesome development, psychological development of a child starts very, very early, which is why it is not very advisable for the child to wait for learning and to learn these things for it to go to school. You wait for 5 years for the child to go to school? No, that is too late. Psychological development has already started when the child is in the womb. So that is sight, and that is taste also. How does a mango taste? How does a chocolate taste? So for these, the child will have to eat and lick the mango and see how they taste. A book will not be able to teach the child the differences in these. And then also, we see the impact of stories in children's psychology. What are these? Develops imagination. The child starts to imagine things when he hears stories. Supposing you telling the child a story about Cinderella, or about a little boy who's learning to swim in the river and he sees fish in the water. So the child will start to imagine, what was the river like, or was the water cold, or how many fish were there in the water. So when the child starts to imagine these kind of things, he or she starts to develop his imagination. And we have also seen how children play house when they are small. So here we notice that kids pretend to be the father, they pretend to be the mother, or they pretend to be a doctor or a nurse or a shopkeeper, whatever fancies the child's imagination. And in the process, we also come to see that what the child wishes to probably be when he or she grows up, who is the role model in the child's life. And that person will have to be very careful about what example he or she sets for the child, because the child is following that person. And as the child follows that person, the child's psychology is being developed around the behavioral attitude of that particular person. Then we come to acts as antidepressant. Stories act as antidepressant because it diverts the child's mind. When something stresses the child, and suddenly if someone comes and tells the child, okay, come, let's talk about something, or take the storybook and read for a while, so there's a diversion in the child's mind, and the child, even if temporarily, forgets about his stress or depression, and by the time it has finished off with the story, it has probably gain some courage to cope with that stress. And stress sometimes goes away on its own. So we just need to give that time to the child. And then, of course, stories also develop language in the child. So when the child hears new words, and we have to encourage the child to make the child use that word in sentences of its own, and then maybe later use it in stories of its own. So what happens is that the child starts to learn new words. It builds its confidence, and in the process, it is more open to interacting with people. And the more and more the child interacts with others, he becomes more and more social, and socially, he garners his or her confidence. And a confident child walks towards a psychologically well rounded and well developed child. Then also we see that stories instill curiosity. I would like to give you a small example here. When Isidore Isaac Rabi, who got the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1944, when he was in school in Brooklyn, and after school, when all the children came out, the mothers would ask the children, so, what did you learn today? That was the question, the normal question. But Isidore Isaac Rabi's mother, it seems, would always ask him, so, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? So, what was it? She had actually started to develop the child's curiosity in whatever is around him, whatever was being taught to him. And it was this curiosity in the foundation of his learning that led his path to such massive discoveries and such massive learnings, and eventually got him the Nobel Award, Nobel Prize for Physics. That was in 1944. So we see that curiosity is being built in a child's psychology when we ask the child and encourage the child to ask back. So when we ask the child, supposing in the process of learning a story, hearing a story, supposing we ask the child, I'll go back to the same story that I had referred to about the child learning to swim in the river. Supposing we start to ask the child, so what do you think the water was? Was it cold or was it very deep? So the child will start to think and its curiosity will develop. It will also start to think, so was the water deep? Was it cold? It will want to know more about water, water in river, water in ponds. So this is how there is an impact on the child's psychology, and it enhances the learning process. And then we see that it boosts confidence. This we have already discussed. And then stories also help cope with growing up issues. Sometimes it so happens that a child, if it does not interact with others its own age, or even if it does, if others don't share with it, if the child is going through the pains of growing up, it will think that that particular pain or that particular phase in life is exclusive only to that particular child. He will think that I am abnormal. This isn't happening to anyone. Then why is it happening to me? Others are not saying anything about this. Then why is there physical changes in me? My voice is getting changed, or there is a difference in my thought process, or there's a difference in who I like to talk to or play with. Am I not normal? Is this an abnormal development in me? So these are questions in the child which are taken care of when the child reads when the child learns about other children his or her own age. However, we also have to see that there is parental or parental guidance or someone senior, elderly, who have to take care to see what the child reads and what is age appropriate for the child. Then we come to how stories develop rounded emotions. We notice one thing, that there is emotional simulation in a child when he or she reads stories or listens to stories or even shares his or her own stories. So the child learns what kind of attitudinal behavior is being shown by people around her or in the situation around her. When the child looks at a person, she should be able to know that whether the person is angry or whether there is pity in the child's eyes, in the adult's eyes, in the person's eyes, or whether there is compassion or whether there is love, or whether there is hatred and danger in the person's demeanor. So the child learns to differentiate and recognize these emotions in those around her. This is in the sense that, in a sense, will help to protect the child for self-defense. This is what it is. Because sometimes when a child is not able to recognize between good glance or bad glance or good behavior or bad behavior from among those around her, she becomes vulnerable. And to protect her from this vulnerability, it is very important for her to have a simulation of emotions in herself and in others. Like when we saw the video of the story about Donnie going to the park with her grandmother, she had seen a squirrel. So we see that there was the feeling of the sense of uh, sharing in her. There was the sense of love in her for the squirrel. So these are kind of helping for the rounded emotional development of Dani, who is I'm taking her as an example of children in general, in common. And also when we talk of rounded emotion, we also see that these rounded emotions instill sharing, which we have learned from the story. And all this somehow is not possible from only classroom lessons. And all these are not airtight compartments of emotion. As the child grows, we see that every emotion blends into each other. A child cannot have, when we cook something, we have separate ingredients to start off with. We have garlic in one place, we have turmeric in one place, we have salt in one place. But when we start the cooking process, everything has to go into a very fine blend. And when the actual item, the actual recipe has been done with and the dish comes out, we should not be able to find out where is the salt and where is the turmeric in separate airtight compartments. If they are still in separate airtight compartments, that means there is wrong cooking. The process of cooking is wrong. So this is exactly like the psychological development in a child. When we start to instill all kinds of emotions in a child, they start off with different ones, but as the child grows, they all have to blend and mold the child into one wholesome, beautiful child with beautiful thought process, which is integral perfection. And then we also see that storytelling develops social behavior and bonding, which is very true, which we have always already seen. And storytelling is not just you sit down and you start to tell once upon a time there was a king and you say and the child listens. No, this is not necessarily storytelling. Storytelling can also be like, supposing the child is walking along the road with you and the child says, "Hey mama, look, There's a dog on the street. Look, he has a collar around his neck. It's red. So that also is storytelling. And in the process, what happens? The child has observed whatever is nearby in its surroundings, and it has been able to express that situation. So it has developed social behavior because the child is being able to talk, being able to take the situation, the circumstances around it, and narrate it so well. So, yes, then we come to the next. Now, this here, the little girl is taking a storybook, she's reading it, and we see there's a nice soft bear behind her, and she is being cushioned by the bear. Now, okay, in actual life, this may not be possible. This is, of course, not possible. But what this picture, this image represents is that the child has forgotten her loneliness. She is so engrossed in her story that stories are giving her company, and maybe there's a bear in the story and she imagines it around her, and that's a loving bear, and the bear is cushioning her. So she has drowsed her loneliness in stories. So what we see, that stories also give company to a child, and the child learns to be in control of its loneliness. Especially post-COVID, we see that it is not always possible for a child to be in company of its own age or in company of its parents, as we are in nuclear families nowadays. So, and nuclear families, moreover, with both parents working. So sometimes it's not possible for the child to have someone or the other always around her, which is where stories come in. Otherwise, a bored child will have the devil gnawing into its mind, which will again hamper in the child's psychological development. Yes, there will be psychological development, but it will be negative probably. In the next image, we see a GIF. I have muted the audio, I have muted the sound here. So here we see that children are probably singing nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are again another form of stories. So we see that they know their social behavior. They are happy clapping their hands and singing. And at the same time, they also know that they are not to intrude into the other child's space and stomp into the other child's foot as they are dancing. So this is a representation of how early learning and early social interaction in the socio-cultural context, as we're discussing today, we see that how the child develops its social limitations. It should be happy, but its happiness should not come in the way of others' happiness. So this is very, very essential in psychological development of a child. Now, some time back, I had also discussed, we see that there ought to be parental guidance in what children read. Now, let me show you the next one. Here also, the child is reading a book, but probably it is something scary. It probably is something about, monsters or ghosts or whatever, and something which is traumatizing the child. So in her mind, we see there are demons because we had discussed how stories develop the imagination of the child. We see that as the child is reading the book, she imagines monsters all around her. That is frustrating her. That is scaring her. So what happens in real life? Such a child loses her confidence. She starts to fear everyone around her, and she sees everyone around her as a monster, as someone who's going to harm her. And to cover this up, to camouflage this fear and inconfidence in her, she or he will start to become a bully herself. She will start to bully those weaker than her. She will start probably in school to eat the tiffin of other little children younger to her, or she will start to be a rowdy in the streets. So, which is again negative psychology in a child. So, this is also something we have to be very, very careful about. So, the next one, okay, we have seen this, we have seen this. Now we go on to the next slide. I had mentioned at the start about the sixth sense. The five senses are those, the senses of sight, hearing, touch, smell, and what was it? Yes. What was the fifth one, please? May I know?
The sixth one was intuition.
No, the fifth one. We discussed sight,
Okay, sight, smell,
taste,
touch,
hearing, and touch.
And hearing, yeah.
Yes, so those were the five.
And then intuition.
And then intuition, which is the sixth sense. Now, why do we have the sixth sense? Now, for the sixth sense, it is the subconscious mind. It is built in us, but sometimes we are not aware of our subconscious. And the subconscious is the dormant mind. It is the storehouse of every past experience we have had, every memory, and every dream sometimes, which we are not aware of. But they're all stored from the time maybe we have learned to remember and know and recognize things. So the subconscious is a very, very powerful storehouse in our subconscious. And the conscious mind is the active mind, whereas the subconscious mind is the dormant mind. Now, where does storytelling come in these two dormant and active parts of the mind? So storytelling and stories act as a bridge between the two. Whatever is in the subconscious, as the child learns to hear stories, the child remembers certain things, and these probably are transferred on to the conscious mind. So what exactly are there in the subconscious mind? Beliefs. Right from childhood, we grow up with certain beliefs. Where we go to pray, what we eat, what kind of dresses we eat, or what kind of cultural practices we follow. These are beliefs in us. Nobody teaches us certain things, but we learn them. And sometimes learning, I should have told this earlier when in the learning process, but what happens is sometimes stories help in learning things where a child cannot and should not actually experience in reality. Death, for instance. We cannot go through death to learn and learn about death. So these are situations which a child learns through storytelling. Now, coming back to the subconscious mind, we see that we have beliefs in there, we have values. We used to read a moral science when we were in school, and we were taught values, good values. Again, certain values which values different from culture to culture. And stories bridge this cultural gap in a child. Sometimes for so many reasons, we have to shift from our roots. We travel to other places and we settle down there. We don't get to talk of our beliefs back at home. We don't get to talk of our roots. But because of stories, we are still in connect with our roots. And when we come to values, whatever is instilled in me, whatever the values are instilled in me, may be different from whatever values are instilled in others, but they have remained in my subconscious. From stories, they will be transferred on to the conscious mind. So for instance, when we see, say, warrior in a story, we see that there is a fight going on for maybe land or for which may be justified. But a child probably has learned that fighting is bad. But the child of a king, the prince, will probably learn that I have to fight for my land, for my throne, and I have to protect my people, my subjects. So the battle, the fight for that particular child is okay. But a particular child, another child, will probably feel that fighting is wrong. And we all have our own values. What my thinking about fighting is maybe different from yours. So these are the values that are instilled in us, and they are in our subconscious mind. So when we read stories or when we hear stories, we start to take a decision. We start to judge what actually we like to follow. We like to discover ourselves and our values through stories. Then we also see that subconscious mind is the long-term memory. Like I told you, it is a storehouse, a very powerful storehouse of every experience that has been with us since we remember. Now, sometimes we notice that during meditation, we begin to recollect dreams which we had seen many, many, many years ago. How is it possible? And then when you see the dream, you suddenly remember that, oh my God, I had seen that dream. How long back? I don't remember, but I had seen it and it had been inside me, which is an example to say that everything is stored in the subconscious. And because meditation clears the shelves inside our memory, like we clean out shelves in our wardrobe, meditation cleans out the shelves in our memory, stacking things separately and organizing the memory. So, which again leads to the psychological development in a child because it lets the child have some space to grow and discover itself. So this is long-term memory. Then we see protective reactions in the subconscious mind. Reactions we had already discussed how emotional simulation is important in a child. Now we come to protective reactions, which are in the subconscious mind. For instance, say when a child sees a butterfly, the child's reaction would be, oh my God, how sweet. Let's see how many flowers it kisses. Let's see what are the colors in its wings. Let's follow the butterfly and let's not harm it. So this is the instinct. This is the reaction when we see a butterfly. Now consider the same child walking along a very narrow foot track through bushes and shrubs, and then it sees a snake. What would be the reaction? The reaction possibly and definitely will not be, how sweet, let's follow the snake and see what are the colors, the stripes on its back. No, that's not this child's reaction. The child's immediate reaction would be, oh my God, that's a snake, turn back and run. So these are protective reactions nobody probably taught the child, but they are in the subconscious. So when the child sees it, this is also a sequence of events. The child walks through the narrow foot track, the child sees the snake, and the child reacts. Something triggers a reaction. What triggers that reaction? Probably the child has read or heard a story before that there is a snake and where it had probably harmed the human, or even if it has not harmed the human was scared of the snake. So these are protective reactions that trigger the child's self-defense. Then we see instinct. Instinct is also very, very close to the sixth sense. Sometimes we have this gut feeling, we think of a certain friend. Why is she coming to my mind so much today? Do you think she'll drop by? This is just an instinct, and suddenly you hear the bell ringing and then your friend is there. So there is an instinct. So subconscious plays a role in it, not in the context of storytelling, but that certain things around the situation of this child has built up in such a way that probably she gets the feeling that her friend is coming to see her. That particular feeling is enhanced when the child goes through the process of talking, interacting through stories or through just talking with people around her. And how is it? You see, certain events lead to others. And earlier, when the child had read a story, then probably the character in that story had certain feelings, and then it led to the coming of the character's friend. So just in the same way, probably the subconscious mind triggered off those particular scenes and those particular memories from that particular story, and the child feels the character in the story had these same feelings. I am having these same feelings now. So do I think my friend will drop by? That is an instinct, the gut feeling. So now let's look at child psychology from a different perspective. Here, child is an acronym. So let's see what leads to a rounded and balanced psychology in a child. Here, child psychology, the C in child psychology stands for cognitive abilities. The child learns to recognize through stories. And like we discussed, it is not always possible for the child to get into situations, get into real and active situations to learn about that situations. But through stories, the child learns. And this is cognitive abilities. The child picks up life skills. The child picks up learning. So cognitive abilities is part of a balanced psychology. And then the H in the acronym stands for humane values. Stories also teach the child how to be humane towards others, and in the process build a strong and healthy psychology in a child who is going to be a strength to society, because we're talking of socio-cultural we're talking in the context of socio-cultural development. So a child, we're not looking at the child's growth and development in isolation. We're talking of the child's growth in context with society. We're talking of the child's growth in context to its behavior towards society. And society definitely will behave from a child who is humane and caring. And then we go on to the I. The I is interactive skills. Here we see that how a child interacts with others in society. The child should know where to be kind. The child should know where to establish and ask for its rights. And the child should also know when to be helpful and when to talk and help strangers and when to avoid strangers. I'm just giving an example. So stories, through storytelling, we enhance and we develop the interactive skills in a child. So the child learns to tell what is happening to herself, and sometimes the child knows that a lot of emotional upheaval is going on in it, but it's not being able to share it. It is not being able to discuss about it, and in the process it goes into depression. This should not be. And we also see that interactive skills developed early on in life also helps a child later on as it does its further higher studies. Say, for instance, a child has become a doctor, then its interactive skills will be able to, help it in history taking of a patient. He has to ask the patient, what are your ailments? The child, as it grows up into a doctor, it cannot just sit down and start and wait for the patient to tell its problems. because all patients will not be able to talk maybe. And also they are so worried and anxious about their illness. They don't know which part of their illness the doctor wants to know about. So here, interactive skills developed early on in life will help the child as a doctor, as a grown-up, to take out the accurate history of the patient. Okay, that is for a doctor. Supposing for in every other field, the child has a brilliant idea for a project, for a blueprint. So when he prepares it, he is not being able to talk about it. He prepares a wonderful presentation, but when it comes to interaction, when to those whom he or she is showing the presentation is asking the child questions, he or she is not being able to answer them. But he has every answer. He can write it down. But writing at that point maybe will not be feasible, or even in writing, the child falters. Why? Because there is a lack of interactive skills, then which was instilled in early childhood. So early interactive skills is very, very important for balanced psychology. And then we come on to L, liberal acceptance. So since we are talking of a child in society, we have to see that the child is tolerant towards others, just as the child expects others to be tolerant towards it. If I like to eat apples, and if my friend at the next chair at the same table next to me likes to eat bread and cheese, I should not, snigger up my nose and say, oh my God, what nonsense are you eating? That's wrong. So I'm giving the instance of food, about tolerance in food, but that is when the child is small. Later on, if there is intolerance in the child about small practices and small situations around, it will lead to religious intolerance later on. It will lead to educational intolerance. It will lead to intellectual intolerance, because we also notice that every human is not endowed with the same caliber of intelligence. So someone who is more intelligent should not be intolerant towards someone who has less intelligence. The one who has less intelligence may need to ask a question 3 times in a class, but the one who is more intelligent will grasp it the instant the teacher tells about it. So in this situation, there should not be an intolerance of the more intelligent towards the less intelligent. This is what we talk of liberal acceptance. This is why we need to instill in the child how it should be liberal in its attitude, and it should accept the flaws and situations and the values and the beliefs the other child has grown up with. We have talked about beliefs and values in the subconscious. So the child has to be taught about tolerance towards others, just as he expects others to be tolerant towards his. Now, this is also into balanced psychology. And the last, the D in child psychology, is decision making. So now we see that through stories, when a child reads a story or when a child is told a story, we see that the child notices how a character decides when it comes to a situation of dilemma, or when it comes to a situation where it needs to quickly decide. So the child picks up that particular situation. It will be able to think, what was that character doing? What decision did that particular character take when it was in this particular situation? It looks like I am also in this particular situation now. Let me go back. Let me think what kind of decision was taken. So this If not the exact decision, the child will at least have a guideline to what kind of decision is probable, what kind of decisions are optional under those situations for the child. So the child learns about decision making as well. So now we quickly sum up. We see that the C in child psychology is cognitive abilities, the H is humane values, the I is interactive skills, the L is liberal acceptance, and the D is decision making. And all of these together go into a balanced psychological development in the child, because we want a child who is a strength to society. And then going on to the last slide for this session. What is storytelling and why have I chosen storytelling? Because the first thing is I am a storyteller myself. And secondly, of course, like I already told you, it is probably the first step, the first medium through which a child learns. So storytelling is a large, radiant ball of learning in our lives, which enhances interactive learning. And what does interactive learning enhance in the psychological development in a child? It enhances the subconscious. And what does the subconscious help to enhance and grow? Self-discovery. So who does the self-discovery? The child. So unless and until the child knows itself properly and thoroughly, it will not be able to know others. So this is very, very important. The child has to know herself or himself so that it knows others, so that it knows situations elsewhere, which is all about the socio-cultural context of child development and integral perfection. We want healthy children, and which is why we will have to spare time with children so that later on they are healthy enough to give time for themselves and time for the weaker in the society, to the vulnerable in the society, and to the senior in the society. We see a lot of problems coming up nowadays that aged parents and grandparents are not being taken care of by the children, by the younger people. This is all about, when we go back to the child's developing age, I think these should be taught in childhood, and we came to that the child who has been able to discover himself or herself will be able to discover others, know others, and who will later on be able to take care of his or her parents, grandparents, and senior citizens. So yes, this is the end of my slideshow, and I have come to the end of the slides, but this is it. Eventually, everything is not and cannot be tied up in just 1 hour of a session. It is a continuous process of how we deal with children and how children deal with us. It is very important that how children deals with us is all dependent on how we deal with children. It's a learning process. The children learn and we learn with them. And for this learning process to be in a continuous inertia, I think storytelling is very, very important. Yes, so now I think we can go on for interaction. Yes, I have come to, I think I will close up my discussion now. I mean, my talk. I have been talking so much. I don't know if I have bored so many of you, but now I think we can go on for some discussion. Yes.
Thank you so much, Rashmi Narzary ji. Listening to you, I was just remembering my childhood.
Oh,
I think this was much happening with all the associated members. So thank you so much for your nice lecture, and you have very clearly explained the topics from a creative writer's viewpoint. And the significance of the storytelling towards the psychological and social development is really one of the important factors which you have very systematically and very clearly you have mentioned. I just want to add one of the quotes of Sri Aurobindo, where he says, in education, the child was regarded not as a soul meant to grow, but as brute psychological stuff to be shaped into a fixed mold by the teacher. We have traveled to another conception of the child as a soul with a being, a nature, and capacities of his own, who must be helped to find them, to find himself, to grow into their maturity, into a fullness of physical and vital energy, and the utmost breadth, depth, and height of his emotional, his intellectual, and his spiritual being. I am on quote. So, understanding the child's psychology from a fresh point of view, where the child is an acronym, and the real interaction focusing on the psychological aspects like the interactive skills, human values, cognitive abilities, and liberal acceptance. And more about the storytelling traditions which you focus that is the first and the foremost media by which a child can learn. It can enhance the interactive learning and the self-discovery to find oneself. So and now I think there are writers, those who are working in the area of children's literature, they were listening to you and they have some queries or suggestions. So now the floor is open for any discussion, please.
This is the time, I am most scared about. I am like a child at the examination hall to be grilled, and the kind of questions, maybe some will be out of syllabus. So this is the moment I'm most scared of. But never mind. If you all help me, I will take on. Let's see. Yes. So do we have any questions?
Rajinder ji, you want to raise your hand to ask something?
Or even if there are no questions, we may have some input, someone's opinion or someone discussing about child psychology. So we can do that as well.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It's a really nice kind of a nostalgia feeling for me when I see your presentation and all this. It's just going with a flow. So it's very good to be here with you in this session. Thanks a lot to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy I could be of some use to the massive kind of and wonderful kind of organization that you all are. I am happy that I'm being able to just be a drop in that ocean.
Ma'am, you have a very impressive and knowledgeable lesson from you. And I was very surprised how child psychology was explained by your good self, and storytelling and story writing skills जो है के ऊपर काफी बीच में आपने बात किया. So we are very thankful to you for such a brilliant and impressive lesson you have given us for your lecture.
मैं शुक्रगुजार तो मैं हूँ कि मुझे ये मौका मिली है. And I like to observe children and I like to see the process of learning. And जैसे मैंने बताया कि मेरे लिए भी it is a continuous learning process. तो इसीलिए शायद पता नहीं आप लोगों को कैसा लगा, पर मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा ये प्रेजेंटेशन बनाते हुए और आप लोगों के साथ शेयर करते हुए. Yes, thank you so much.
May I ask something, ma'am?
Yes, of course, why not? But I am not very sure of being able to answer that. But yes, please go on with your question.
I'm very happy and really impressed to see your lecture and your PPTs. Um, Going to the next level, I think I wish that after understanding the importance of such stories and storytelling in the mind making of children and in their say integral growth.
Yeah, can you please repeat your question, sir? Please.
Yes, can we think to make a kind of collection of such inspirational stories, motivational stories, and a small encyclopedia kind of that, so that it can be provided to the children of the country, so that it will really help, and this lecture will come to the real some fruitful end. So this is my
Yes, this is a brilliant suggestion, I think. This is a brilliant suggestion. Yes. There can, of course, be a compilation of such motivational stories. Yes, this is a brilliant suggestion. I think if we all get together, nothing is impossible. We can do that. We can do that. Yes. So there will be stories which children are able to relate to, where children see themselves as the character in the stories and how these characters play out in the stories, and which will motivate the children.
yes. This is my request to AuroBharati too.
Yeah, yeah, we have noted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, may I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I had two questions. First of all, thank you for this very, very informative session. My questions were related to one, I work with very young children. So let's look at early childhood education. So if you can throw a little light on, both Maria Montessori and the Waldorf tradition says that the repetition of stories with little ones is very, very important. So if you can throw a little more light on that aspect of the need for repetition at that age. And you also see that children themselves will ask for the same story again and again at that age.
Right.
So a little more light on that. And the second one was, of course, the suggestion already came, but about this compilation. But nonetheless, we have so many sources, like we have the entire Panchatantra. But what we realize is how do you select? So a little more light on what are the kind of stories for little children. And I'm talking, when I say little, I'm talking right from age 1 to, about 4 or 5. Is there something that we can look at, or is there a source? Because the Panchatantra stories, although there's a lot there right now, and that is just one of the sources that I've been going to, I think to make them more age appropriate, not in terms of the child's age, but also in the age that we're living, to offer it in that way. So if you can just let us know your thoughts on both these.
Yes, even thank you so much for that lovely and meaningful question, Nilima. Yes, I had also often thought about it, because children in 2022, they cannot imagine a talking tiger, dancing snake. So there is probably something which the child is not being able to relate to. And Panchatantra is mostly about animal stories, and they are very, very valuable. When we were kids, I think it was these stories that had molded us, and which is why we are now being able to give our very, very little bit to society. But because we are talking, and because you had wanted to know about the present context, about Panchatantra stories' relevance in the present context, we can't think of a child talking about talking animals in the forest. A child who is so much into computer games, a child who is so much into anime, so that child will probably not find interest in something that a tree is speaking. The trunk of a tree is a face, and the tree is talking. The child will promptly respond, come on, a talking tree. that is nonsense. So yes, instead, that very story, we can probably replace the animals with other interesting characters, like instead of an animal in the wilderness, in the forest, we can probably have something in the cast of Mowgli, a wild boy who was in the forest but who behaves like an animal, and then we can transport that animal's character into that boy. This is just an example. And then we are also talking about repetition in the story. Again, a very small example. We say, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Why do we not say, "Twinkle, little star"? There is a repetition because that repetition enhances the child's memory. And we also have a whole bunch of folklore, especially in the Northeast. We are a land of folklore and folk literature. And most of our, stories and our culture is undocumented and it is passed down orally. So we have a whole lot of oral literature, a folklore, which actually has repetition in it. And by repetition, you probably meant that why does a child want to repeatedly hear to a particular story? That means we know that that particular story has enthralled the child in such a way. That means something in the story has drawn the attention of the child. What is in that story? Is it the main character? Or is it the way the character behaves? This again will lead to an interactive session between the storyteller and the child. So the storyteller will have to ask the child, so what in the story is that which you like the most? And we will have to take out the child's curiosity. Asking such a question will lead to the child answering it. So what happens? The child is in the process also encouraged to ask his or her question. He or she will ask, "Mama, why did this particular character behave this way?" So this again is instilling the child's curiosity. So we know that in what trend of curiosity the child's mind is working, whether it is the child's in what process it is its learning capacity is channeled. This guidance will help us to motivate the child in taking that particular line of education later on in life. Because we often see that a child interested in music is forced by his parents to study maybe geography, whereas the child would have done brilliant in music. So at the early stages of life, if there is this curiosity installation in the child, if there is interactive questioning during storytelling sessions between the child and the storyteller, we get to know these kind of things in what the child's interests lay, whether it is painting or dancing or music or plain technical education. We can groom the child accordingly, which will help the child to be a well-rounded grown-up and be happy with his or her profession. Because nowadays we have seen that a whole lot of kids are ending their lives. A whole lot of kids are, trapped in professions that they don't feel passionate about. Why is it? Because they have not been able to express what they wished. They have not been able to tell their parents. And similarly, parents have not been able to see what the child actually longed for. I think all this goes to storytelling, which is why repetition that you talked about. When a child wants to listen to a particular story repeatedly over and over again, we can take a hint. Why has the child picked out this particular story to listen to repeatedly? or it may be a particular song. If it's a particular song, then what is the visual that accompanies the song? These are a whole thing, you know, and like I said, we cannot discuss them in airtight compartments. All this is interrelated, and all this is how storytelling, the repetition in storytelling, or the wish to hear repeatedly a particular story is looked at as the grooming resource in a child. So I hope I have been able to answer that question, Nilima. And was there another part to the question, please?
No, I think you've addressed it all. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much. I hope I've been able to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
रश्मि रमानी जी सिंधी के बहुत ही प्रतिष्ठित लेखिका हैं, और मैडम आप भी कुछ आपके विचार इस अंत में रखें तो आपका स्वागत है।
मैं आप सभी की बहुत आभारी हूँ कि आपने मुझे आज इस कार्यक्रम में आमंत्रित किया। बाल साहित्य में मैं भी काम करती हूँ, और बरसों पहले मैं जब पाकिस्तान यात्रा पर गई थी तो लौटकर जो पहला काम मैंने किया था वो सिंध की लोक कथाओं का अनुवाद किया था। और अभी जब मैं ये व्याख्यान सुन रही थी स्टोरी टेलिंग पर, जैसा मैम बता रही थी, वो 100% सत्य है, क्योंकि मैंने बहुत लोगों को लोक कथाएं सुनाई हैं, क्योंकि मैं बहुत यात्राएं करती हूँ। और इसका फायदा मैंने कुछ इस तरीके से लिया कि मैंने मुसाफिरों को लोक कथाएं सुनाई, और इस शर्त के साथ कि जो लोक कथा मैं आपको सुना रही हूँ वो आगे आपको किसी और को सुनानी पड़ेगी, यही मेरी फीस है। क्योंकि मेरा ऐसा मानना है कि लेखक के पास और कुछ तो होता नहीं सिवाय शब्दों के। एक उम्मीद होती है कि शब्दों के जरिए वो दुनिया बदल सकता है या कुछ अच्छा कर सकता है। तो कहीं ना कहीं इसी बात को ध्यान में रख के मैंने लोगों को कहानियां सुनाई। पर अभी जो व्याख्यान मैं यहाँ सुन रही थी, ये बहुत ही, जिसको बोलना चाहिए ना, मतलब उपयोगी तो था ही, परंतु ये बहुत ही व्यवस्थित था। बहुत सारी चीजें हमारे दिमाग में होती हैं, किंतु हम उनको इतने व्यवस्थित रूप से प्रस्तुत नहीं कर सकते जितने व्यवस्थित रूप से आपने प्रस्तुत किया। ऐसा नहीं है कि ये सब चीजें लोग जानते नहीं हैं, पर जब मैं आपको सुन रही थी तो मुझे लगा हाँ, ये सब जानना समझना लोगों के लिए बहुत जरूरी है। और संयोग से हम एक ऐसे समय में जी रहे हैं जिस समय में बच्चों पर शुरू से ही ध्यान देना बहुत जरूरी है, वरना आने वाला समाज कैसा होगा उसकी कल्पना करना बहुत त्रासद है। और सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि ऐसा तो कोई पौधा नहीं होता जिसमें हम मिनरल वाटर, घी या तेल या सूखे मेवे खाद के रूप में डालते हों। डालना तो उसमें सादा पानी ही पड़ता है। तो कहीं ना कहीं इस व्याख्यान में जो बातें बताई गई हैं वो मुझे लग रहा है सादे पानी की ही तरह हैं। अगर वो बच्चों के अचेतन में या उनकी जो ग्रोथ है, उनका जो विकास है, उसमें अगर काम में लाई जाएं तो कहीं ना कहीं हम आने वाले समाज को और ज्यादा बेहतर बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे होंगे। ये एक ऐसा प्रयास है जो बहुत जरूरी है और ये किया जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि जब हम ऐसा सोचते हैं, अखबारों में घटनाओं को पढ़ते हैं या आजकल के बच्चों को जब हम देखते हैं, तो मैं अगर सीधे साधे शब्दों में कहूँ तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि 50 साल पहले बच्चों का व्यक्तित्व गोल चिकने पत्थर की तरह होता था, जो अब एक नुकीले धारदार पत्थर में तब्दील होता जा रहा है। और ये एक सत्प्रयास है जिसमें आज मैं भी भागीदार बनी हूँ। आपका मैं बहुत बहुत आभार मानती हूँ, बहुत कृतज्ञ भी हूँ।
थैंक यू सो मच। और
I just wanted to tell here, you know, I think also another thing about storytelling as a medium of learning is that it is one medium where you don't need any other gadget or any other device or any other paraphernalia. You need absolutely nothing but just a love, a passion for learning and teaching. This is why I think also it is the first and foremost medium of learning. Yes.
Yeah, this is really an important thing which you mentioned.
Mhm. Yes. And then I also tell children, it is the core skill of life, where again, core is an acronym where C stands for, connect. You connect with your surroundings, you connect with people around you. So that C stands for connect. The O stands for observation. You observe your surrounding. And then the R stands for retain. What you have connected with, what you have observed through that connect, you retain. And the E is for express. Later on, you express what you have retained. When the time comes and when the situation asks for it, according to the situation, you express it. So this I call the core skills of life and learning. So this is again an acronym. I am a very forgetful person by nature. I think because I do too much of childlike activity around me. So I tend to forget so much, which is why I depend so much on acronyms. And acronyms is also another part of storytelling and learning. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other views? Or shall we proceed? रश्मि
मुझे
रमानी बोलेंगे। हाँ।
मेरा एक निवेदन है कि अभी हम जब भारतीय भाषाओं की बात करते हैं तो आपने ध्यान दिया होगा कि हमारे जो बच्चे हैं भाषाओं के मामले में बहुत ही पिछड़ते जा रहे हैं, और जिस तरह का काम अभी किया जाना है, ये जो वर्कशॉप होने वाली है,
जी।
उसमें मेरा सिर्फ एक ये सुझाव है कि बच्चों से न सिर्फ कविता कहानियों का वाचन करवाया जाए, वो किसी भी क्षेत्रीय भाषा में भी हो सकता है, उनकी मातृभाषा में भी हो सकता है या किसी अन्य भारतीय भाषा में भी हो सकता है। साथ ही साथ उनको प्रेरित किया जाए छोटे छोटे विषय देकर, जैसे मानवीय संबंध हो सकते हैं, पर्यावरण हो सकता है, या जैसा कि अभी वक्तव्य में बताया गया कि किस तरीके से बच्चों की जो कल्पना शक्ति है उसको हम विकसित कर सकते हैं। तो इस तरह के अगर हम बच्चों को टास्क देंगे तो ये ज्यादा उपयोगी होगा। और कहीं ना कहीं आपने देखा होगा कि बच्चे जो भाषा बोल रहे हैं वो कितनी प्रदूषित है, उसकी शुद्धि भी करना बहुत जरूरी है।
जी, बहुत ही अच्छा सुझाव है। और मैं आपकी जानकारी के लिए बोलूं,
हाँ।
जब हमने इस प्रोग्राम की एक नाम रखने का सोचा, हमें कई दिन लगे, कई नाम हमारे सामने आए
जी।
और अंत में जो हमारे मुख्य विजय भाई हैं, जिनके गाइडेंस में हम ये सब, माता जी के जो व्यूज हैं, उनके जो विचार है, उसको कार्यान्वित करने में यहाँ सेवा में है, तो इसका नाम हम लोगों ने रखा बाल संस्कृति।
हाँ।
तो इसका एक ऑब्जेक्टिव ये है कि, और इसका जो टैगलाइन नीचे का है, टुवर्ड्स क्रिएटिविटी एंड इंटीग्रल परफेक्शन, तो इसके पीछे ये लॉजिक है कि जब हम बच्चों के क्रिएटिविटी और इंटीग्रल परफेक्शन में बात करते हैं तो कल्चर वहाँ पे एक बहुत ही बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट होता है। लैंग्वेज इज पार्ट ऑफ दैट। और लैंग्वेज के अंदर आखिर हम एक भाषा की बात करते हैं तो वो और भी स्क्वीज हो जाता है। इसलिए हम उस सारे जो पाबंदियां हैं उसको तोड़ के, जो बच्चों की अपनी दुनिया है, जो किंगडम है उनकी, उस किंगडम में हम उनको बुलाते हैं एंड दे विल एक्सप्लोर देमसेल्फ। और इसकी जो मॉड्यूल्स हमने रखा है, जिसमें स्टोरी टेलिंग भी है, क्राफ्ट्स भी है, मेडिटेशन भी है, देन द साइकिक गेस्चर मुद्रा प्रैक्टिसेस भी है। वी आर आल्सो इनवाइटिंग वन ऑफ द फैकल्टी मेंबर्स फ्रॉम पौंडीचेरी यूनिवर्सिटी। वो बहुत ही अच्छे परफॉर्मिंग आर्ट्स में करते हैं। और हमारे साथ शंकर भैया भी हैं, जो कि इंटीग्रल एजुकेशन में बच्चों को किंडरगार्टन से ट्रेन करते हैं। इस सारे बातों को ध्यान में रख के ही हमने इस वर्कशॉप को बनाया। मैं लेट मी जस्ट शेयर द स्क्रीन फॉर, दिस इज द स्क्रीन एक्चुअली, दिस इज द प्रोग्राम थिंग। So we have given special emphasis on this mantra chantings, the mudra practices, storytellings, crafts, theaters, group discussions, team building and lots of fun. तो वो 3 दिन में हम भी उन बच्चों के साथ बच्चे बनेंगे।
बच्चों की तरह से अगर आप संसार को देखेंगे तो ये संसार ज्यादा सुखद और आकर्षक लगेगा।
जी जी जी।
और काफी कुछ तनाव रहित भी।
जी, तो ये बहुत ही अच्छा सुझाव है और इसी दिशा में हम लोग कार्य कर रहे हैं, और आपका जो सुझाव है हम जरूर इसको नोट करते हैं, उसमें करेंगे। और
सर,
कोई?
मेरी एक request
जी
थी।
जी
मेरे खुद के भी बच्चे हैं जो पौंडीचेरी को ये वर्कशॉप को आना चाहते थे, लेकिन अभी राइट फ्रॉम महाराष्ट्र टू पौंडीचेरी इतने कम समय में ये पॉसिबल नहीं दिख रहा है। तो क्या आप ये वर्कशॉप एक्सटेंड कर सकते हैं मराठवाड़ा के लिए, या किसी और रीजन्स में भी इसको ऑर्गेनाइज कर सकते हैं?
जी मैं अभी उस बाल संस्कृति की जो हमारी ऑब्जेक्टिव है उसमें फोकस करना चाहता था अंत में, और आपने इस बात को उठाया है, बहुत ही सुंदर बात है। ये जो हमारी बाल संस्कृति का प्रोग्राम है, ये सिर्फ पौंडीचेरी में ना होके हम इसको डिफरेंट राज्य में और डिफरेंट जगहों में जाके करेंगे। और इसका एक दिशा है जहाँ पे कुछ रिसर्च एंड पब्लिकेशन क्वालिटी टीचिंग मटेरियल्स की बात है, और जो प्रोग्राम्स हैं हम लोग इसको एक हमारी मतलब कि हम आंचलिक क्षेत्रों में भी जाके इसको करें। तो ये आज बिगिनिंग था, जो कि मैडम रश्मि नर्जरी जी के बहुत ही सुंदर व्याख्यान से इसको ये हुआ, और हम लोग जरूर आपके संपर्क में रहेंगे, और हमें भिन्न राज्य और केंद्र शासित अंचल में इस कार्य को करना है, और आप लोगों की मदद से बहुत अच्छे से हो सकता है। हम स्कूल्स, कॉलेजेस, इवन इफ कम्युनिटी कल्चर विलेजेस में भी जाके, जहाँ पे उन बच्चों के पास उस तरीके की फैसिलिटीज नहीं है, वहां भी काम करना चाहते हैं। तो इसको एक व्यापक रूप देना है, और इस सब में आप सबकी जो सहायता है, सहयोग है, जो श्री माता और श्री अरबिंदो के जो विजन्स रहे, और बाकी काफी सारे चिंतन गोष्ठी के विचारक रहे जिन्होंने समाज को उद्बुद्ध किया, उसी कार्य को करने में आप लोग के सहयोग से हम इसको बहुत अच्छे से कर सकते हैं।
मोस्ट वेलकम सर।
जी, अभी हम इसको एक टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग का भी प्लानिंग कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि जब हमने इस वर्कशॉप को और इस प्रोग्राम को अनाउंस किया तो काफी सारे टीचर्स की आए कि हम भी ज्वाइन करेंगे। तो हमने बोला कि ये तो सिर्फ 5 to 13 ईयर्स के लिए है, आप लोग के लिए हम कुछ अलग से स्पेशल नहीं करेंगे। तो धीरे धीरे हम लोग इसको आगे बढ़ाएंगे, और आप लोगों के सहयोग की हम कामना करते हैं।
थैंक यू सर।
मिलके ही हम लोग कुछ अच्छे से काम कर सकते हैं।
मोस्ट वेलकम
जी।
Annie, this is what I was thinking, like when you said about encouraging children to just talk in their own mother tongues.
Yeah.
So when I have my workshops with the children for creative writing, or when communication skill workshops we have, so it is not always you write a story and read it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just give them props. I just give them, okay, you look around your room and what are the things there. Now you build something around these things and tell me quick now. Let there be wrong English, let there be grammatical mistakes. It's all right. You just express yourself, which is the first step towards, learning and teaching. So this is it, that spontaneous sharing of knowledge. So this is what I think Rashmi ji ने भी बताया था कि उनको सिर्फ ये नहीं कि कविता पढ़नी है या कुछ stories you have to share, but we also have to inculcate the habit of being able to be spontaneous and talk. This is what interaction was about when I told during my slides. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is one of the unique ideas. We will really implement this. And I think now is the time to end the session.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being here. And on behalf of Sri Aurobindo Society, I would like to present my sincere thanks to today's speaker, Rashmi Narzary, and all the learning audience who spared their valuable time and join here. And this is the beginning, and we are planning to do something more innovative. We're trying to reaching to the people, visit to different places, and to see the the kingdom of the children's, and creating the quality contents, especially the encyclopedia one, is a really big and huge task. And surely we will plan something for this. And I request all of you for your kind cooperation in bringing this. We will organize similar programs And if you have any suggestions or any special projects or any programs we can organize in your areas, you may please write to us, and jointly we will work together. And we have to do a lot of things in this area. Of course, so many things are going on. We can just add on to that. And with these few words, I want to conclude with the vision of the mother that childhood is the symbol of the future and the hope of all victories to come. So my sincere prayer to all the children all over the world, and we will definitely work for the benefit of them. With these few words, thanks to all of you. Namaste.
Thank you so very
Thank
much.
you
Have
so
a good
much.
day.
Thank you so much.